Hey folks, what's up? Welcome back to another Poem Master video. So, with this month, basically we got all the new units that have been announced, or Datamined already, right? Before our next Datamined. They're already out, and I thought we'd go ahead and, sort of go over them, right? For this month, what we've got so far. So let's start with supports. So we're going to do supports first, and we'll do techs, and then we'll do strikers later. So, first of all, shoutouts to Runner and Priyank for helping me out with this, right? Get some more perspective. So yeah, let's get into this. So basically, again, we're just evaluating them in general, just because like supports, a lot of them are very specific because some are special supports, some are physical sports, right? So it's really hard to say in overall which one's better, but I do think there are in some cases where it's just overall in a vacuum. Some units are just more well-rounded, or they're just more powerful at what they do, right, than maybe some others. For example, like as a special attack buffer, right, Meg Alexam is just a better special attack buffer than, say, Rosa, right? But again, it's just it's all obviously all subjective, and if you disagree with it, fine, I don't really care. So yeah, let's get into this. Oh, also one more programming note: we will be streaming some more Ultra Loose Moon later today as well. Probably sometime after 7, around 6-7 PST. So stay tuned. Again, I'll announce the exact date on Twitter, which you could follow. It's somewhere in the description box. Anyways, yeah, so if you guys do enjoy the content, all this stuff, make sure to subscribe, and let's get into the stuff. So, let's just start from left to right, I guess. Again, this is just mainly based on single player content, right? The stuff that we have. It is sort of adjusted for the new stuff that we've been experiencing, right? And some changes that we've had to the old events, like Battleville, right? So Clefairy, I'd say it's probably in a solid third tier, right? Clefairy, fantastic buffs offensively, gives you both physical and special, +6. You get it maxed out. You get accuracy maxed out, which I do think Clefairy has been much better than it was before, because before it's just buffing accuracy. Like a lot of times if you're getting like +4 accuracy, it's pretty much overkill for like all the lower accuracy moves, right? +4 accuracy is just way too much. You don't need that much, right? However, in recent months we have been getting some strikers that kind of need more accuracy, stuff like Blue or whatever, Lycia, with having stuff like Brutal Clarity, right? The more the accuracy is raised, the more it powers up moves. So it's not only just so your moves don't miss, but also do some more damage, so accuracy obviously helps there. Her 6REX is fantastic, right? You heal on sync. That's on the grid, not the 6REX, but, 6REX you have to sync, right? And then, you give your whole team a heal on sync. That's always great to have. And she heals herself, which is nice. The only slight downside is instead of like getting like plus crit, she gives a guaranteed crit, which is good in some cases. It's really, really good when you're sync nuking, right? That's fantastic. But in most other cases, you generally just want +1 or +2 crit instead. And also her speed is slightly, her speed is not good, unfortunately. But otherwise, again, fantastic unit, right? Moving on, Salamence I probably put in like the second last here. Great defensive buffer, right? Gives you both physical and special defense. It's an all-in-one, kind of unit, right? Itself can't stay alive that long. It doesn't have any heals for itself, so it's not like a great tank by any means. Again, it's not terrible. It's a support. Like most supports are at least like semi-decent tanks, right? It also gives you some move gauges, which is nice. Dragon Breath could potentially paralyze, which is cool as well, right? But outside of that, it doesn't really do too much, right? It gives you almost nothing offensively, and also doesn't have sync grid, so you don't have MP refreshes on your stuff, right? And plus, there's just better defensive buffers overall in the game right now, unfortunately. So there's that. Moving on, let's go to Hilbert, I guess. So Hilbert is in a weird situation because like Hilbert just hasn't had its synchro expanded yet, which could help him in the future. But you know, even without an expanded synchro, it's still not bad per se right now, because it does get you +6 physical attack relatively easily, and you know, physical supports just in general in the game just aren't that great in comparison to a lot of special supports, right? And also gives you speed, which is nice. Waterfall could flinch, but outside of that, doesn't really do anything, right? It doesn't give you crit, unfortunately. But it does give you really, really good physical buffs, right? That, you know, straight up easy +6 physical attack is very, very, very good still. Moving on to Delibird. Delibird, I probably, you know what? Let's add a tier in between these two. Let's add a tier in between these two. Let's call this, I don't know, 3.5. I don't know. Something like that. So we're gonna put Delibird here, because here's the thing with Delibird. Like, Delibird is fantastic in an ice team, right? Very, very good in an ice team. However, outside of the ice team, it's still not bad, right? You still got you know, physical attack buffs, you got speed buffs, you know, move gauge, regen buffs, the random buffs, right? But again, outside of Hail, you can't give crit buffs, which is kind of important, right? In Hail, you could get crit buffs, although it really depends on what Hail unit or Ice type unit you're using it with, because you know, Ice type units generally don't really need crit buffs, like or Ice type strikers. Pheromosa doesn't need crit buffs, because it has it herself, right? I mean, it would be nice to have it, but again, she has it herself. Ice Steven doesn't need crit buffs. You can max that out. Dugong doesn't really need crit buffs. Again, if you get MP refreshes, you could max that out as well. But again, it's still something nice to have overall. And you know, relatively decent defensively as well. Moving on, Lunatone is probably, I'll put in the lowest tier. It does buff you both physical and special attack, which is cool, but it's kind of niche, because like if you actually think about it, if you're going like most units in the game, they're either physical or special, right? So if you're trying to go for like a special support, you'd probably just use something like a Torchic or, you know, Probopass instead. And if you're using, you know, if you need a physical support, probably just go with Medicham or Torchic instead, right? Just talking about, you know, the relatively free to play sort of semi units, right? So Lunatone just really doesn't have that much use. It still gives you defensive buffs, which is nice, right? I don't think any of these like supports are generally just really good overall, right? There really isn't like too many like super bad supports that's just weighing the whole team down, right? Moving on, Torterra. Torterra probably put in, you know, it's in the second tier over here, especially now that it has a 6 REX. That helps a lot because, you know, its sync move is actually really good. It does a really good amount of damage, and it's really self-sustainable offensively. So like the amount of chip damage that you get from Torterra is really, really nice. Not to mention, obviously, the tanking capabilities. It does have vigilance, right, built in to her passive. And then, you know, I got an AoE move, which you could then give her like since you don't need to give her vigilance, you can give her something like Defense Crush on your lucky skill, which is nice as well. She does decent damage. Again, she heals with healthy healing. She's got a full restore. And she lowers your opponent's attack, physical attack, right? Just really, really great stuff that Dawn does, right? So, moving on to Torchic. Torchic, I probably put it in Delibird's tier. Torchic obviously also doesn't have a Synchro, but Torchic is just so versatile, right? She gives you both physical attack and special attack and crit, right? And speed. And could potentially burn the opponent. So just really, really great things overall. Nothing too much to say about it. The only like slight unfortunate part about Torchic is you can't get like +3 crit. It's only like +2. But again, you know, as a free-to-play unit, it's probably the best you could do, right? Moving on, you got Evie. Evie, I'd probably put it in the same tier. I think Evie has dropped off quite a bit, unfortunately. One of the big reasons being, you know, Balvilla not as relevant as it used to be before. Evie was really, really great in Balvilla. And then now that Balvilla is, you know, it's not a continuous thing anymore. You don't really see Evie see that much play anymore. And now with 6-star EXs as well being a thing, using your sync move just becomes so much more valuable. And unfortunately, she does not have a 6-star EX nor a grid yet. So like using her sync move, because like remember, her only way of buffing your team is syncing, and now that there's just so many more value or so much more value in syncing with some other units because 6-star EX or whatnot, right? It just makes Evie just not as valuable as before, right? She still does some great things with potion and all that stuff, but overall, I do think her viability took quite a decent hit. Moving on, Misty. Misty, this was one that was sort of debated between first and second tier. I do think it's probably second tier for the moment being. Misty, first of all, does insane amounts of damage. I think, is Misty the best striker for supports? I think it is, right? Misty, insane damage dealer. On top of its support capabilities, X special defense all, which is kind of rare because there's a lot of units or you know, defensive supports that give you physical defense, X defense all, but there aren't as many that give you special defense, which Starmie does do that. Starmie also gives you evasion, which is nice, right? I think the only way to apply evasion from a support right now without, you know, RNG. So there's that. Also gradually heals, right? All that stuff is nice. And also, you know, chance to cure any status conditions on her passive. Just a fantastic overall unit, right? Moving on, Rotom. Rotom has been slipping as well. Rotom, it still gives you, you know, special attack, which is nice. The amount of crit that it gives you is kind of sad because you only have like 1 MP for breathtaking. So unless you MP refresh it, you just can't get good crit buffs with Rotom, unfortunately. It's overall, it still has some good stuff, right? You could get hostile environment with Thundershock to paralyze your opponent, and it's still a 1 gauge spam, which is always nice. Rotom could tank relatively well, heal, dodge, all that stuff, but it just wasn't as good as it was, you know, before, right? Unfortunately. Moving on, we got Dusknoir. Dusknoir probably put it in here as well, right? Dusknoir gives you max crit, which is honestly all that it needs to, you know, move it up here, because max crit is something that's very, very valuable in this game that not too many units could actually provide you with, right? On top of that, also give you some move gauges. It is slightly slow, but again, does give you some move gauges sometimes. And then also, you know, it tanks relatively well and also gives you physical attack, which is nice. So moving on to Stoutland. Stoutland, I was thinking between these two tiers as well, but I kind of settled over here, right, in the 5th tier, same tier Salamence. I do think it's better than Salamence, though. The gradual heal is really, really good, right? Any unit with gradual heal is good, and Stoutland does have that, right? Also has a full heal, which is nice. It just doesn't have, like, because it doesn't have a grid, you don't have move gauge refresh on your attacking moves, which does make you slightly a liability sometimes on the move gauge, even though Apply Yourself does give you some gauges. Once you run out of that, you're, you know, kind of tough, right? You don't have, again, no 1 gauge move to spam and no move gauge refresh to sort of rely on when things get a bit tough, right? So there's that. Moving on, Medicham. Medicham was also another one that was that I was contemplating moving up one as well, but I again also settled over here. Medicham just has really, really bad stats, unfortunately, overall. But Medicham does have some good stuff, right? It has Brick Break, it gives you crit, right? +2 crit, gives you physical attack, gives you no misses, right? Drain Punch. It has a good kit. The passive is kind of not that great. It's not terrible either, though, but it's not anything crazy. It's just, again, if you want to move it up here, I wouldn't really object to that either. But again, its stats are really bad. Speed's not great either, all that stuff. Moving on, Glailey. Glailey, I do personally think, in an Ice team, I do personally think Glailey is slightly more valuable than Delibird. However, outside of Ice, you really don't use, like, Glailey's value just drops so much when you're not using her in Ice team. Unlike Delibird, which, you know, if you don't use Delibird in an Ice team, it's still relatively nice, right? It's still not terrible. But Glailey outside of Ice team is just struggling, right? Unfortunately. But in Ice teams, it is so very, very, very good, right? Moving on, Alakazam. This is still in the first tier, right? Alakazam, one of the, if not the best overall, most efficient offensive support in the game. You Easily maxes out crit, easily maxes out your special attack, gives you speed, gives you accuracy, right? Heals you, puts up reflect, which stacks on top of any defensive buffs that you get. Does good damage, right? Can confuse your opponents. This thing is incredibly nuts, and it's still very, very, very good, right? Moving on. Oh, there's another one, right? Senzu Bloom Blastoise is fantastic, right? Crazy defenses to start. The buff on a Synchron made it so much better, right? Even though the heals aren't that much, it's still something, and that kind of helps, right? The speed that it gives, it's not great as it does give you offensive buffs. It's not good as an offensive buffer just because they're very random and unreliable. But if you do have an already, relatively reliable offensive support, it could be, a bit of a supplementary support, right? As well over there, which does help a lot, right? So that's nice. Moving on, Steelix, I probably put it here as well. We were kind of sort of arguing if Steelix was second or third tier. Did sell on second tier. Steelix, fantastic defenses, monstrous physical defense, right? It could do some solid damage to Tough Cookies, Surging Sand 9 on Gyro Ball, right? Recuperation, heals up every time you sink, all that stuff. Soothing Sand, fantastic if you're running it in a sand team as well. Just overall, really, really great unit. Moving on, Swan is still all the way up here. Swan is still just incredibly broken, right? The MP refreshes on Potion Master Healer, chance to flinch on your 1 gauge Gust spam, the chance to get 100% chance to get a gauge back every time you use Gust. Good defensive stats overall. It's just fantastic, right? You really can't go wrong with Swana at all. Plus, she's about to get a 6-star EX soon, which is going to make her even more broken. Moving on, Comfey. Comfey is an easy second tier as well, right? Comfey is, in my personal opinion, the best pure tank in the game, right? Again, it doesn't do a lot of the things that, something like Torterra, Steelix, or Starmie or Senzu Blue would do. However, if we're just looking at the numbers in terms of pure tanking, it's fantastic, right? It has only 2 or 3 points less in defense than Torterra, has more special defense than both Steelix and Torterra, has more HP than I think both Steelix and Torterra as well. Does it have more of HP than Blastoise? I think Blastoise still has a bit more, right? 6, 2, 3. Yeah, Blastoise has a bit more, and I think it does have more than. It does have more than Steelix, and I'm not 100% sure if it has more than Torterra. Let's check. Okay, it does have a bit more than Torterra as well, right? So fantastic defensive stats. It has an X regen all for your whole team to gradually regen. It has Draining Kiss with Master Healer on your Draining Kiss to every time you attack you heal twice, right? And your special attack's not bad either. It's like 280 something. That's way higher than Nate, right? Which is fantastic. And you have an AoE potion for your whole team that also removes any stat debuffs and also gives defense and all that stuff. This thing just does one thing and one thing only, which is heal, and it's incredibly good at it, right? So moving on, Probopass, I probably put it in the 5th tier over here as well. I love Probopass. Probopass is probably my favorite Gasha 3-4 star support. It gives you speed and special attack on one trainer move, right? It also gives you defenses, wide guard. It could take a few hits as well. Just overall fantastic unit. It just gets unfortunately outshined by a lot of other special attack buffers in this game. And also, no grid. So there's that. Moving on, we got Blissey. Blissey cannot take a physical hit, but fantastic special defense for one. It heals, gives you special attack. It's just good. It's a very, very, solid buffer, right? Moving on, Kiara Costa, Marlin. I'd probably put in the last year, in my opinion. I don't know. It's kind of between him and Arcanine now. Arcanine used to be really, really good when the game first launched. It did, drop quite a bit since then, right? But Kiara Costa, it just doesn't really do anything. Like, okay, X defense all, and then redirect damage. Well, then you're not even that tanky, so why are you even trying to redirect damage? Why do you want to die, right? So, yeah, Kiara Costa just really doesn't do much. Moving on, Meganium. Meganium is an easy second tier as well. It really does remind me a lot of, like, it's kind of like a Walmart Sabrina, right? Gives you the maxes out your crit, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't max out your special attack or physical attack, but it gives you both, right? A bit, and gives you a bit of speed. You heal a bit as well, right? So overall, just, fantastic support that also gives you max crit, right? So there's that. Moving on, Superior also kind of fell off a bit, but I don't think it's like that bad yet, because like it's still a fantastic tank for one. Time to energize is always useful on like almost every team, right? And X special attack all is still nice. The thing about Superior is, and the reason why I maybe wanted to move her like down one as well, but the reason why I didn't move her down one, because she has a free like 6 REX, which is great, right? But her downside is she really doesn't do much outside of just buffing her, X special attack all, which is just not a huge deal anymore, right? I mean, it's still very, very important, but there's just, again, just so much other better X special attack all units, unfortunately. And we've alluded to this earlier, but Marley's down here, unfortunately. The speed is nice. The protection against status is nice, but niche, right? And she could take a few hits, but overall, outside of that, she doesn't really do anything, unfortunately. And it's just, in almost every case, you would probably find something else to use over Marley, right? If you want a speed buffer, either Delibird or Hilbert or Probopass or Swan is just straight up better. If you want something to deal with status, right? You got stuff like Charon, you got Misty, right? You got Comfy. Oh, I almost forgot to mention Comfy also has 2 helping hand 2s as well, right? So yeah, that's slightly unfortunate for Arcanine. But anyways, that's me with this one, I guess. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, shout outs to Prank and Runner for helping me go over all this stuff. And yeah, again, hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know, guys, think in the comments down below. Like and enjoy this video, subscribe to the channel for some more Pokemon Masters content. I'll see you guys in the next one.